Hey guys, welcome to your senior year, quarter four. This is usually it. This is the big time. This is when senioritis starts kicking in too. So we're going to get through as much as we can get through. I am going to try to hit all of the chapters you guys talked about in the extra credit assignment from last quarter. I still have that. So this is going to be a lecture through effectively the first half of chapter 17. It's the digestive system. I have the notes open on my laptop, and I'm just going to lecture through them. I will try to mention slide numbers as much as possible. You guys have a copy of this on Classroom as an assignment, just so that you get a copy of it yourself, so you don't have to make a copy. You can just edit that one, all right? If you hit submit, though, I have to return it to you so you can have it again. So don't submit it. Don't worry about that. Just use it how you want. If you want to make a copy of it for yourself and save it someplace else, go right ahead. I don't care. It's yours. There will be a bunch of assignments on Classroom. Do them as soon as you can. Don't put them off. I know you guys have course load, but try to get my stuff done too, all right? It will take time to work through the questions. There are like 80 questions this chapter. The first half of those are due this week. There's an assignment posted for that. All right, today we're going to start with the digestive system, and we're going to go through the liver. That should be like 50 slides, all right? So digestion is just when we break down food into chemicals. And we're going to do this both mechanically and through enzymes and proteins, which are the same thing, but you know what I mean. So we've got organs that do this through the digestive system. We're going to ingest the food, we're going to propel it through the system, we're going to absorb it, and then defecation is our word for pooping. So the alimentary canal starts at the mouth and ends with the anus. It includes all the accessory organs as well. There's a very nice breakdown on slide 3 of each organ and accessory organ and what it does. All right, use that. The alimentary canal itself is about 8 meters long. That will change based on your overall height and size. A larger person does have a longer alimentary canal. A smaller person, smaller alimentary canal. Do not worry about memorizing all the individual layers of each area more than the normal vocab stuff, all right? I'm more concerned with you getting the fact that there's generally an inner membrane that is full of mucus that protects it and helps with absorption, and then there's usually a muscular as well that works to propel the chyme or the bolus through the digestive tract. All right, so generally this is going to be a mucosa, a submucosa, and then a muscular layer and a serosa on the outside. We've had a bunch of serosas before. These are just epithelial connective tissues that protect the outside of the alimentary canal. The mucosa is going to also work for secreting those enzymes into the alimentary canal. All right, slide 7, you can see both paralysis and segmentation, where in A, we've got the churning of the stomach through muscular contraction, and then in B and C, we've got waves of contraction that propel either a bolus or chyme forward through the tract, or downward in our case, right? So the alimentary canal has both parasympathetic and sympathetic innervation, right? So the parasympathetic increases the activities of the digestive system. That's the rest and digest. The sympathetic is fight or flight. So it's going to tone down digestive action so that energy can go towards skeletal muscle and for cardio. All right, and so we're just going to work through this top down, so beginning to end. So we're going to start with the mouth. You eat with it, right? The teeth mechanically break up solid particles, the tongue breaks up solid particles, and saliva starts to chemically digest the food. Chewing it is masticating. Careful how you say that, I know. That's one of the vocab words. The cheeks and the lips make up the lateral walls, and then the mouth opening itself. This just helps with moving the food around and mixing it in the mouth, as well as keeping the mucous membranes from drying out because your lips can close. All right, the tongue is a very large muscular organ. It is not the largest organ, but it is very close. The liver is the largest organ. So this is covered with papillae that have taste buds. You'll see this on slide 11. Remember that taste buds are over the whole tongue from tip all the way to the back where it enters the esophagus. Each of those taste buds is going to be able to detect any type of taste, not just a certain kind. It's not regional. That's an old school myth that I don't know why it got started. The papillae, the taste buds, require some amount of fluid. If they're very, very dry, they'll have a hard time detecting anything just because it's very similar to the neurotransmitters. We need a carrying fluid to get those signals across. If you dry your mouth out with paper towels or eating a lot of bread and then you put salt or sugar on them, your tongue, you'll have a hard time detecting that taste if you want to try that yourself. And then if you take your tongue and touch the top of your mouth, the roof of your oral cavity, you'll find the hard palate, the anterior part, and the soft palate, the posterior part. You can see a diagram on slide 12 for that. Don't worry about memorizing all the little parts on the right side of that diagram. But you should know the difference between the hard and soft palates. It's not difficult. One's hard, one's soft. Slide 13 has a kind of unsettling picture. It's a picture of a child's skull with both deciduous and permanent teeth. Deciduous teeth are baby teeth. Usually there are 20 of them. Secondary teeth are called permanent teeth or adult teeth. And you should have 32, but 4 of those are wisdom teeth that a lot of people have removed. All right. Take a second, look at the bottom right-hand picture on slide 14 and look at how terrible that image is. It's gross, I know. I don't know why they picked that. It's kind of creepy. But you can see the different types of teeth labeled there. Incisors, canines, and then molars with first and second. And if you have your adult teeth, the third or the wisdom teeth. And then if you have all your adult teeth, you'll also have bicuspids, which are kind of premolars. They're between the canines and the molars in the back. Pointier ones are for cutting. The flatter ones are for chewing. You guys know that stuff already. Not a big deal. Slide 15 does show a cross-sectional view of a tooth. I do want you to know the different parts of a tooth. This will be helpful just in your adult life, not just in my class. The outer covering of enamel, we used to think any damage to that was permanent, but we're starting to be able to regrow or recoat enamel. But those are very expensive procedures, so a lot of people don't have them done. Dentin is innervated, so any break in the enamel allows the dentin to be exposed, which can be painful because it's innervated. You could also be susceptible to cold. So cold fluids or very hot fluids can cause pain there. And then below the gum line or the gingiva is the root part. And this is what gets drilled down into if you get a root canal, where they're going to remove that affected section, whether it's from a cavity or what have you. And you can see that this is innervated and it's got blood flow. So if you lose a tooth, you'll bleed. These do have nutrients. They are not dead like your hair or fingernails. All right. Continuing a little bit further back, we have our first gland. There's going to be a few glands in the digestive system as we're going to be excreting a bunch of different things. The salivary glands, there are 3 kinds. There's the parotid, the submandibular, and the sublingual. So these are in pairs. So you really have 6 of these, plus a whole bunch of minor ones throughout your whole mouth. They secrete saliva. Right, the parotid glands are going to be secreting a lot of salivary amylase, whereas the submandibular glands have serous fluid and some mucus, while the sublingual glands are primarily mucus secreting. Mucus works to lubricate food. Amylase is going to start breaking down those carbohydrates. Right, so moving on to slide 19. If I'm going too fast, feel free to hit pause, guys. This is a video. Go back, watch it again. Just don't slow it down because it'll sound weird. All right, so the pharynx is your opening in the cavity that connects the mouth to the esophagus. And the esophagus, of course, leads to the stomach. So this is coated with a larger amount of muscular walls, as it's going to be responsible for swallowing. That's my dog in the background because I'm recording from home, and evidently there's a stranger outside. All right, so the pharynx has three different regions: the nasopharynx, the oropharynx, and the laryngopharynx. The nasopharynx is at the top back. It's above the soft palate, kind of in the nasal region, right? And then the oropharynx and the laryngopharynx are below that in descending order. The swallowing mechanism is the first thing that you should probably make sure that you are aware of for like an essay question or a long short answer question for a test. There are three stages to it. There's the voluntary stage where saliva is mixed with chewed food. This is you chewing and getting ready to swallow. As the tongue pushes that food towards the back of the mouth and closes off, we move into the secondary phase as the palate and the uvula raise and the hyoid bone and the larynx elevate. Then the epiglottis closes off, so that top part of the mouth closes off the top of the trachea so that you don't get food in your lungs. And then the longitudinal muscles, so the ones that run this direction, start to contract and push the food down, and then we get peristaltic waves. So it's kind of like one area contracts while the next area relaxes, so the chyme moves forward. Chyme is what we're using for this food that's starting to get broke down, but it's still not completely broken down. All right. You can see this on slide 22. It does a good job of describing this in kind of 4 statements with some pictures. My dog is now upset. All right, so we've got the esophagus that leads into the diaphragm. Come here, puppy. Come here. He doesn't know what to do because the camera is here. All right, so the esophagus actually goes through the diaphragm, right? And it is one of the only things that actually punctures that barrier between the cardio versus digestive parts of the abdomen, right? We talked about those way back in August or September, right? And then we've got the stomach in the upper left quadrant with the liver in the upper right quadrant. The stomach is J-shaped. It's 25 to 30 centimeters long, so not very long. It's not very big. It can stretch to accommodate larger portions of food, though, especially if you're somebody who like Joey Chestnut, competitive eating. And it has 2 layers of smooth muscle, a circular layer and a longitudinal layer. You can see those on slide 25. These allow for that rhythmic constriction that churns the food and allows the stomach acid to completely break down, or further break down at least the chyme. And then on slide 26, you can see an actual scan view. You can see the fundus and the gastric folds there. The fundus is just the top portion, right? The body is the next portion down. Gastric folds are just kind of like the giri we saw in the brain. Same thing, but in the stomach. Larger surface area for digestive, either excretions and for absorption, because the stomach does absorb some things. If you go to slide 27, you'll see the gastric secretions. We've got pepsinogen and pepsin, hydrochloric acid, mucus, and the intrinsic factor. Don't stress out too much about memorizing each and every one of these and what they do, all right? If you hit the stuff that's on the vocab list, you'll be okay here. All right, all of these are secreted through the gastric pits that are between the pili in the mucosa membrane. Remember, those give us a lot of surface area so that these gastric glands can excrete. They're goblet cells. They just excrete. That's all they do. And so this pepsinogen gets transformed to pepsin with hydrochloric acid, which is also being released here. And it splits proteins. And then you've got mucus glands, which protect the stomach wall from the hydrochloric acid because that pH is strong enough to affect the non-mucus covered. That's how you get ulcers. And then you've got intrinsic factor, which is required for B12 absorption, as it alters the outside of that vitamin so that it can be absorbed easier. All right, slide 30 is our first homeostatic cycle here, where we've got the parasympathetic preganglionic nerve fiber, the vagus nerve, innervating the stomach, and as it's stimulated by the release of, it stimulates the release of gastric juice from the gastric glands so that you can digest food in your stomach. As that happens, the gastric glands also release gastrin, which is a hormone. It travels into the bloodstream, which feeds back to the gastric glands to release more gastric juice. So as you continue to eat, your stomach continues to produce more gastric juice so that it can digest. Once you stop eating, that presence flips and it has a negative feedback loop so that it no longer produces gastrin. All right. So the stomach itself can absorb water and some salt, as well as fat-soluble drugs and alcohol. A lot of fat-soluble drugs are going to be those quick-acting, those quick-release medication for either pain or symptom management, but not the long-term ones. The long-term ones are going to have a little bit of fat-soluble as well as a little bit of water-soluble so that they get released over time. Alcohol is absorbed here. That's why people get drunk so quickly and start seeing symptoms of alcohol poisoning very, very fast. On slide 33, you can see chyme being churned with the pyloric sphincter contracted so that there's mixing involved. Once the pyloric sphincter opens, it can flow into the duodenum. And that's a very simple process outlined on slide 34. The pancreas is an endocrine and an exocrine gland, so it produces hormones as well as digestive juice, pancreatic juice. You can see its location on slide 36, as it is right next to the duodenum. It has a entrance called the major duodenal papillae, where it can flow the pancreatic juice into the duodenum. Pancreatic juice has pancreatic amylase and pancreatic lipase, as well as some things for digesting proteins, for digesting nucleic acids, so nucleases, and bicarbonate ions to make the pancreatic juice alkaline so that it balances the pH of the hydrochloric acid that's in the chyme from the stomach. Remember, we don't want anything that's too acidic, but we also don't want anything that's too basic. We want to keep our pH levels very close to 7. And you can see the negative feedback loop for pancreatic secretion on slide 38. It's something you should read and be aware of, but I'm not going to test you on that one because it's very simple. All right, the liver is your largest internal organ. That'd be a great test question if I ever saw one. So if we had the stomach over here, the liver is opposite it, and it's much larger. It's also very firm. It has 2 lobes, the left lobe and the right lobe. They are separated by the coronary ligament and the inferior vena cava. All right. You can also see the gallbladder on the anterior portion, and as it floats above the pancreas and kind of inside the liver. Floats are a bad word here. It's connected. All right. And again, the liver, because it does a lot of filtering, we have a lot of surface area, right? The liver produces glycogen from glucose and breaks down glycogen into glucose. So it's maintaining that blood glucose level for us. When you have any kind of diabetes, it usually affects the liver, as well as anything like alcohol poisoning starts to affect the liver and stop these functions. They're outlined on slide 43. Probably a good thing to memorize 3 or 4 of these. Again, you know how I like to ask questions about functions. So it's going to convert non-carbs to glucose so that they can either be stored or broken down further. And then it's going to oxidize fatty acids so that they can be used. Fatty acids aren't very useful for your body. It's also going to synthesize lipoproteins, phospholipids, and cholesterol, which are used in cellular metabolism, as well as building cells through mitosis, meiosis. Right? We're going to convert any extra carbs into and proteins into fat for longer term energy storage. Remembering that that's what fat is for, it's just energy storage. But it has a lower density. We talked about that before we went on e-term break. All right, the liver does form urea. This is where your body produces urea. It's popped up a few times in our different units, and it will continue to pop up this unit. Right, and then when we talked about the blood unit, the liver does phagocytize and remove the worn out red blood cells, as well as any toxins, foreign substances. So we talked about the stomach absorbing alcohol. Extra alcohol in your blood, as well as certain drugs, are filtered back out in the liver. Right? Bile salts from the actual bile duct and the gallbladder here are, I lost my own slide. I'm on slide 45. It's a greenish yellow liquid. If we had made it to a cadaver lab, I'd be able to show you this. I'm going to try to find some videos, by the way, about that to make them optional so you guys can still see stuff. So bile is water and bile salts, as well as bile pigments, cholesterol, and electrolytes. All right, you always need electrolytes. Your cholesterol, that fat, that's a good fat here, not the bad cholesterol, but good cholesterol. Bile pigments give it color, as well as help to work with the bile salts to emulsify fat, as well as absorb fatty acids, cholesterol, and fat-soluble vitamins into the bloodstream. Slide 47, you can see some gallstones in a color contrast added x-ray here. Yeah, that's a pretty bad case of gallstones. If somebody does if you pick the right pathology, gallstones may be a symptom of it. Right, 48 is, we're getting real close to the end, guys. I want to do regulation of bile release and then we'll be done. All right, so regulation of bile release is another negative feedback loop. This is through hormonal cholecytokinin, which is CCK. I'm going to keep saying CCK because cholecytokinin is harder to say. All right, so as chyme, specifically fatty chyme, enters the duodenum, right? So it goes from the stomach to the duodenum. The cells from the interstitial mucosa secrete CCK into the bloodstream. As that happens, that stimulates the muscular layer of the gallbladder wall to contract and pump out bile. It flows down the cystic duct and into the duodenum, where the hepatopancreatic sphincter releases, so that bile enters the duodenum, so that those fats can be processed correctly. A high-fat diet like keto can have some effects here. That's actually one of the reasons I stopped doing keto, is because it was messing with my gallbladder. All right, so the hormones of the digestive tract, I know that they're on the vocab list, all right? If you get what's on the vocab list, you're good. I'm not going to push you guys on memorizing all of the names of the hormones, their sources, and their functions, all right? But they may pop up in other questions. All right, so bile salts aid digestive enzymes, and they reduce the surface tension to break the fat globulates into droplets like soap or detergent. You guys have all seen like the plate with soap on it, and the fat goes to the sides. That's emulsification, where that's broken down into smaller and smaller pieces. Remember, increased surface area, increased reaction rate. That's what we want. We want to get that going quick and fast so that